Once upon a dreary night, in a quaint little house nestled at the edge of a dense forest, lived a young girl named Emily. Emily was a timid soul, often finding solace in the company of her books and her thoughts. Her parents were away on a business trip, leaving her alone for the weekend. As darkness enveloped the world outside, Emily sat in her room, engrossed in a novel, seeking refuge from the eerie silence that surrounded her. Suddenly, amidst the silence, Emily heard faint laughter echoing from downstairs. Her heart skipped a beat as a shiver ran down her spine. She strained her ears, hoping it was just her imagination playing tricks on her, but the laughter persisted, growing louder and more ominous with each passing moment. Trembling with fear, Emily mustered the courage to investigate the source of the laughter. With hesitant steps, she descended the creaky staircase, her pulse racing with every beat. As she reached the bottom, the laughter seemed to be coming from the living room. Emily cautiously approached the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. Peering into the dimly lit room, she saw shadows dancing along the walls, cast by the flickering flames of the fireplace. But there was no one there. Just as she began to relax, the laughter erupted once again, louder and more maniacal than before. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she felt a cold chill enveloping her. Suddenly, the furniture in the room began to move on its own, as if possessed by some malevolent force. Chairs toppled over, books flew off the shelves, and the curtains billowed wildly as if caught in a storm. Terrified, Emily turned to flee, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping her inside. She pounded on the door, screaming for help, but no one came to her rescue. Tears streamed down her face as she realized she was completely alone, at the mercy of whatever unseen entity haunted her home. The laughter grew louder and more sinister, echoing through the house like a twisted symphony of torment. Emily curled into a ball on the floor, praying for dawn to break and release her from this nightmare. Hours passed like an eternity, but eventually the laughter ceased and the house fell silent once more. Exhausted and shaken, Emily dared to approach the door once again. With trembling hands, she turned the handle and pushed it open, expecting to confront some unspeakable horror. But to her relief, the living room was just as she had left it, the furniture still and the air eerily calm. With a sigh of relief, Emily realized that the laughter had finally ceased, and whatever dark presence had haunted her home had retreated into the shadows. Gathering her courage, Emily made her way back to her room, where she huddled under the covers, vowing never to venture downstairs alone again. And as the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, she prayed that her parents would return soon, bringing with them the warmth and safety of their presence. But little did Emily know, the laughter she had heard that night was not a figment of her imagination. It was the sinister echo of a presence that lingered within the walls of her home, waiting patiently for the opportunity to strike again. As Emily lay in bed, trying to push the horrifying events of the night to the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside, sent chills down her spine. Just as she was beginning to drift off to sleep, she heard a faint scratching sound coming from the window. Fear gripped her heart once again as she turned to see long, bony fingers clawing at the glass, accompanied by a low, guttural growl. Paralyzed with terror, Emily could only watch in horror as the figure outside pressed its face against the window, its eyes glowing with malevolence. It whispered her name in a voice that sounded like gravel being dragged across metal, sending shivers down her spine. Desperate for escape, Emily scrambled out of bed and dashed towards the door, but it refused to budge. It was as if an invisible force was holding it shut, trapping her inside with the monstrous entity outside. With nowhere left to run, Emily huddled in the corner of her room, praying for morning to come and rescue her from this living nightmare. But as the hours passed, the darkness outside only seemed to grow deeper, and the creature's whispers grew louder and more insistent. Just when Emily thought she couldn't bear it any longer, a faint glimmer of light appeared on the horizon, signaling the arrival of dawn. With a surge of hope, she mustered all her strength and flung open the window, letting the first rays of sunlight flood into the room. As the creature outside recoiled from the light, its form began to fade away until it was nothing more than a wisp of shadow, dissipating into the morning air. With a final, triumphant howl, it vanished completely, leaving Emily alone once more. Relieved but shaken, Emily collapsed onto the floor, the events of the night swirling around her like a dark, twisted dream. But as she lay there, bathed in the warmth of the morning sun, she knew that she would never forget the terror she had endured, and the laughter that still echoed in the depths of her mind. A chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of her reality. In the days that followed, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows of her home. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights filled her with a sense of dread. She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination running wild, that the events of that dreadful night had been nothing more than a nightmare. But deep down, she knew that the laughter she had heard, the creature she had seen, were all too real. Determined to find answers, Emily began to research the history of her home, scouring old newspapers and archives for any mention of strange occurrences or unsolved mysteries. What she discovered sent shivers down her spine. It turned out that her house had a dark past, a history of tragedy and death that stretched back centuries. There were stories of disappearances, of strange happenings in the dead of night, of a presence that had haunted the grounds long before Emily had ever set foot there. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Emily delved deeper into the mysteries of her home, determined to uncover the truth. But the more she learned, the more she realized that some secrets were meant to stay buried. One night, as she sat alone in her room, poring over old photographs and documents, she felt a chill run down her spine. The air grew cold, and the shadows seemed to deepen around her, as if something dark and malevolent was drawing near. Then, without warning, the laughter started again, soft at first, then growing louder and more manic with each passing moment. Emily's heart raced as she looked around frantically, searching for the source of the sound, but there was nothing there. With a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach, Emily knew that the creature had returned, drawn back to her home by some unseen force. But this time, she was ready. Gathering her courage, Emily confronted the darkness head-on, refusing to back down in the face of fear. Armed with ancient incantations and protective charms, she stood her ground as the creature descended upon her, its laughter echoing through the halls like a twisted symphony of torment. But just as it seemed that all hope was lost, Emily unleashed a powerful spell, banishing the creature back to the depths of the underworld from whence it came. With a final, triumphant cry, she watched as the shadows retreated, leaving her home bathed in the warm glow of the morning sun. As the days passed and life returned to normal, Emily couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden in the darkness, waiting to be discovered. But one thing was certain, she would never forget the horrors she had faced, or the strength she had found within herself to overcome them. And as she looked out at the world beyond her window, she knew that no matter what darkness may come, she would always be ready to face it head-on, armed with courage, determination, and the unwavering belief that light would always triumph over darkness in the end. As Emily continued to dwell in her home, the sense of unease never truly left her. Strange occurrences became a part of her daily life. Objects would move on their own, eerie whispers would echo through the halls at night, and sometimes, she would catch glimpses of shadowy figures lurking in the corners of her vision. Despite her best efforts to ignore them, these manifestations only grew more frequent and more disturbing as time went on. Emily began to fear for her sanity, wondering if she was truly alone in her struggle against the malevolent forces that seemed determined to torment her. Desperate for answers, Emily sought out the help of experts in the occult and paranormal. She scoured ancient texts and consulted with mediums and mystics, hoping to find a way to rid her home of the dark presence that haunted it. But the more she learned, the more she realized that her battle was far from over. The entity that lurked within the walls of her home was not just a mere ghost or spirit. It was something far more ancient and far more sinister, a being of pure darkness that fed on fear and despair. Determined to confront her fears head-on, Emily embarked on a perilous journey into the heart of the supernatural realm. Armed with nothing but her wits and her courage, she delved deep into the darkness, facing trials and tribulations beyond anything she had ever imagined. But as she journeyed deeper into the abyss, Emily discovered a truth that shook her to her core. The entity that haunted her home was not just a random occurrence, but a manifestation of her own deepest fears and insecurities, a reflection of the darkness that lurked within her own soul. With this newfound understanding, Emily realized that the only way to truly defeat the darkness was to confront it within herself. Drawing upon her inner strength and resilience, she faced her fears head-on, banishing the shadows that had plagued her for so long and emerging stronger and more empowered than ever before. And as she stood victorious in the heart of her home, bathed in the warm glow of the morning sun, Emily knew that she had finally conquered the darkness, not just in her home, but within herself. And though the laughter may still echo in the depths of her mind, she was no longer afraid, for she knew that she was strong enough to face whatever darkness may come her way. With the darkness banished and a newfound sense of peace settling over her home, Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The laughter that once haunted her dreams now faded into a distant memory, replaced by the sweet melody of birdsong and the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Emily flourished in the newfound light that filled her life. She poured her heart and soul into her passions, embracing the beauty of the world around her and finding joy in the simplest of moments. But even as she moved forward, Emily never forgot the lessons she had learned during her darkest hours. She knew that life would always be filled with challenges and obstacles, but she also knew that she possessed the strength and resilience to overcome them. And so, with a smile on her face and a fire in her heart, Emily embarked on a new chapter of her life, ready to face whatever adventures lay ahead. For she knew that no matter what darkness may come, she would always be guided by the light within her, a light that could never be extinguished.
Like, subscribe, and click on notifications that will allow you to stay up to date with the news and not miss videos from the channel, where there will be many more horror stories.